We're going to jump right in. So I just want to welcome everybody. Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. Today is Thursday, October the 15th. I'm Melissa Pache, CEO at the Whistler Chamber of Commerce. I would like to acknowledge that we are having this virtual meeting on shared territories of the Squamish-Lillooet Nations. We honor their language, culture, land, and traditions. The Whistler Chamber, in partnership with Arts Whistler and the Pique Newsmagazine, is delighted to host the virtual Whistler All Candidates meeting ahead of the provincial election. I would like to thank all of our members for your continued support the Chamber receives through your annual memberships and commitments, enabling us to do the really important work that we do. Our next virtual advocacy and action session will be held on October 21st, where your Chamber will be hosting MP Patrick Weiler, discussing the latest federal announcements around supporting business. This event is free to members and all are welcome. For details, of course, and registration, please visit whistlerchamber.com. This evening, we are honored to have Mo Douglas as our moderator, a speaker, facilitator, and consultant on community and leadership engagement. Mo Douglas has more than 30 years of experience in developing and leading community teams and projects. Mo arrived in Whistler in 1990 and spent 10 years as tour director of festivals and events. She was instrumental in the delivery of the 2010 Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games as Vanog's Director of Community Relations for 8 years. Since 2016, Mo has enthusiastically served as the Executive Director of Arts Whistler, Whistler's lead agency for arts and culture. Mo also continues to consult and present through her firm, Mobilize Strategies, based in beautiful Pemberton, BC. It's my pleasure now to pass this meeting off to our moderator, Mo Douglas.
Thanks, Melissa. Good evening, everybody, and good evening, candidates. Thanks for being here at Whistler and Sea to Sky Friends for our online All Candidates meeting. We're here, we are live from the Arts Center, and I look forward to seeing a whole bunch of beautiful faces back in these seats. For now, we have close to 200 people participating online, so it's great to not just have these candidates standing up to represent our communities, but that you're here to ask some questions and be part of understanding the issues and who can represent us best. So tonight you'll be hearing from our candidates. I will throw to them when they make their opening 3-minute statements. We drew names as to what order they will go in, and we'll use that order all night long on a rotating basis. First, you'll be hearing shortly from Keith Murdoch from the BC Green Party, Jeremy Valeriet, I'm getting there, Jeremy, thank you. Second, and then with the BC Greens, and Jordan Sturdy with the BC Liberal Party. So they will provide a 3-minute opening and they'll also have 3 minutes for a closing statement. We'll jump into questions immediately after their opening statements. There's 2 ways for you watching at home on Zoom to ask questions. Using the raise your hand feature in Zoom, and that way you can come on either with audio, you'll be unmuted by our Zoom maestro in the background there, Pete Crutchfield, or you can come on with both audio and video if you choose. You can also use the Q&A function to ask questions, and feel free, you can actually even start loading those questions up now, as I see is happening on the screen. So that's great, and we will, Pete will read some of those questions out. We'll alternate between audio or video questions, questions in the Q&A, and a few other questions that have been submitted by various sector organizers here in the Whistler community. You can direct your question to one candidate or to all 3. What will happen if you would like a statement from all 3 right off the top, each of the candidates will have 1 minute to answer that question. If you'd like to get a bit more in-depth answer from one of the candidates and their party perspective, direct it to that candidate and they will have 2 minutes to answer the question, and the other 2 candidates will then have 1 minute to respond. So we want to hear, a lot of dialogue from all 3 of our candidates tonight, learn as much as we can about their perspectives and platforms. So that will happen, and we hope to get a lot of interaction, and with that, we'd like it to keep it to just 1 question per audience member until we get through a number of questions. And if they slow down and we can have somebody ask another question, great, but we want to spread the opportunity around as far as we can. The candidates will get a 30-second warning when they are down to 30 seconds in their remarks at each stage. They'll get a little message up on the screen. They'll also see this, and you will know that they have that tense moment of 30 seconds to go to wrap up their response. So we are almost set to get going. So with that, it is time for our opening statements, and we give it over to Keith to kick things off with the BC NDP.
Thank you very much there, Mo. So, hi all, my name is Keith Murdoch, and yes, I am your BC NDP candidate for West Vancouver Sea to Sky. I have a long history of helping people and fighting for justice. As a labor organizer for more than 15 years, I've helped create long-lasting improvements for workers, their families, and communities across British Columbia. Over the last 3 years, my advocacy work has been focused in Whistler. I'm one of the founders of the Whistler Workers Alliance, which aims to achieve better working conditions and fair compensation for those working in Whistler. These better working conditions are key to retaining existing staff and attracting more people to come to Whistler and to stay permanently. Growing up, my parents operated a small family business. My twin brother has now taken that business over, and my other brother has started another business of his own. This pandemic has certainly affected my family's businesses, just as it's affected so many businesses in Whistler and throughout British Columbia. I understand the stress and anxiety that business owners are feeling, as well as their employees. Thankfully, the NDP has a plan to help business, people, and communities recover and thrive once again. I want to make positive change in our province, which is why I'm running for the NDP. I think the NDP has the best plan and values to build a future for all of us. During the last 3.5 years, we've already banned big money in politics. So our democracy is influenced by people, not profits. We've added $1 billion to public education funding, launched the most aggressive child action strategy in North America, opened 13 new hospitals and 14 new urgent and primary care centers, increased minimum wage, not once or twice, but 3 times, ended child labor and increased protections for workers, eliminated student loans, funded 25,000 units of affordable subsidized housing with more to come, eliminated MSP, which is saving families up to $1,800 a year while increasing health care services. And we're the first jurisdiction in Canada to integrate the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People into law, as well as the first province in Canada to invest in on-reserve housing. All of this and more was achieved while also balancing our budgets. I'm looking forward to informing all of you more about what we have achieved and what our plan is for the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Keith. And next, we're going to go over to Jeremy with the BC Green Party.
Thanks, Mo. Hi, I'm Jeremy Valeriot. I'm proud to be your BC Green Party candidate. I'm running to be your MLA for my twin 6-year-old daughters, Rose and Nina, help work towards a world that's safe and healthy for them to bring up their kids and grandkids. They know inherently at 6 years old that everything's interconnected, that we can find a way to do better at working collaboratively and creating a shared vision for the future. They're also a great campaign company. They say hi to me after we pass every one of my signs, and they ask great questions like, why are we doing an election in the middle of the pandemic? My story will be familiar to many of you. I was born in Ottawa and arrived from Ontario at the age of 18. The official reason was to study geological engineering at UBC, but I was really here to ski at Whistler, of course. I showed up with my 210 length skinny racing boards and tried to ski powder. That was fun. I'm luckily I didn't do my knee. Since then, I've been skiing, hiking, riding, and visiting friends in the Sea to Sky for nearly 30 years, all over the place from Felix Creek to Howe Sound. I worked as a consultant on environmental assessments, then in local government as staff, until I was elected to Gibson's Council, Town of Gibson's Council in 2014. On that council, I led or supported a range of environmental initiatives, including compost program, transportation improvements, electric vehicle chargers, and world-leading work in natural assets, which I've recently studied for a master's degree in leadership studies. Because I also have a background in the private sector, working for clients in the resource industry and land development, I appreciated that the council that I worked with were also fiscally responsible. They balanced budgets, took leadership in asset management to put aside money for scheduled maintenance and asset replacement. Sounds fun. I learned a lot from that experience. I found I have a passion for public service and I learned about how to get things done in government. I decided not to run again so that our family could move to Whistler a little over 2 years ago. We had always thought of a life here, and now we see why. It's a cohesive, warm, exceptional community of dreamers and doers. Whistler and Sea to Sky residents are forward-thinking, and they see that the future is green. We have to build back smarter and better after the pandemic. We need a sustainable economy that puts us squarely into the economy of the future, takes action on climate change, maintains the social fabric, and protects this place we all know is special. Before we sign off tonight, I'll make a thorough and convincing case for sending a green MLA to Victoria from the Sea to Sky. That'll be in my closing, so stay tuned and let's try to have fun tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks very much. And lastly, on the opening remarks, we're over to Jordan Sturdy.
Thank you, Mo. I'm Jordan Sturdy. I'm your BC Liberal candidate for West Vancouver Sea to Sky. I was born in Vancouver and grew up there and on the Sunshine Coast. My family has since spread out from Vancouver to West Van, Bowen, Squamish, and a couple of us here in Pemberton. I moved to the Sea to Sky in '89 to live and work in the mountains, just like many of you. And I was hired on as a pro patroller at Blackcomb that winter and worked there for 25 years until I was elected as your MLA. I also worked as a BC ambulance paramedic. In '91, I bought the property that's now North Arm Farm. It was that or an old Gothic in Emerald, and seemed like a good idea at the time. Although I knew nothing about farming and proceeded to develop the farming business through trial and error, and as we'd like to say, lots of trial and lots of error. Some of you may well have witnessed the evolution of the farm over that period of time. We're an agritourism destination farm where we grow 45 acres of vegetables and berries, and normally in a normal year would host weddings and events. And I've dealt with many of the same challenges of many of the staff, changing markets, capital. Some of you have been to North Arm Farm, so you understand better my values and the values that we have in the family. My wife and I live with our adult children at the farm. We feel lucky that the kids have gone through the public school system and then off to post-secondary and world travels and have now returned back here because they want to be in the Sea to Sky and they feel that they can have a future here. And making sure that they continue to feel that way is certainly one of my prime motivations. I entered into politics in the early 2000s, first on the Pemberton Valley Diking District, then I was elected as mayor of Pemberton 3 times, and then on the regional district board and ultimately as your MLA. Myself and my team have worked hard as your MLA on a huge range of issues in this region over the last 7 years, from bringing the cumulative effects assessment framework to the Sea to Sky, which is an innovative planning tool that helps government recognize it and people recognize that impacts are larger than any one project, but the combined effects of past, present, and future of human activities and natural processes. And along with this, we brought the visitor use management framework to the Sea to Sky Natural Resource District, where we can address impacts from visitor use on the visitor experience and plan for future recreation management. I work with communities throughout the corridor on transportation issues, getting consensus on a variety of different issues, working on traffic management plans, and I think I'm a balanced approach. Believe in ecosystem-based management. I'm not an ideologue. Like most farmers, I'm a pragmatist. I think most people will understand that. Like you and all your candidates, all the other candidates were here because we want the best for our region and our kids. How can we look at it any other way? Thank you.
Thanks, Jordan. That's great. Okay, we're going to get into questions. Thank you very much, all of you, for setting the stage. And we are going to start with some questions from tonight's partners, starting off with the Chamber CEO, Melissa Pache. She's just going to step in here. We're going to switch out microphones. So all right, there we go.
Hi, good evening, everybody. This question is directed to all candidates. You each have 1 minute to answer. Whistler is built on a tourism-based economy. Prior to the pandemic, the resort drove 22.5% of the tourism export revenue for the province of British Columbia, which translates to $1.4 million in tax revenue for all levels of government. Small business has been the hardest hit during COVID-19. What will your party do to support small business in their effort to build back a strong, viable economy? Oh, it goes to Keith, Jeremy, and then Jordan. And then 60 seconds each. And 60 seconds each.
60 seconds? All right, 60 seconds and counting. So certainly, yes, small business is one of the cornerstones of one of the focuses that the NDP have. We're really focused on small and medium-sized businesses and helping them through the crisis that has happened with COVID-19. Certainly, we've done a bunch of, we've created a variety of grants. We've offered a $300 million grant that tourism industries and all businesses across the province can apply for right now. But specifically for tourism, we also have a $10,000 top-up that assists them. We've provided a variety of tax cuts and other provisions to help these businesses survive and keep their workforce, being able to retain their workforce.
Thank you very much, Keith. And we'll go over to Jeremy. 1 minute.
Thanks. Yeah, it's very important to remember that Whistler is the engine of the provincial tourism economy, and small business is about people. It's our friends and family and our neighbors. So now is the time for government to invest in this part of the economy. We have to do that respecting local knowledge. We have to listen to local operators through surveys, business walks. The Greens, just to get started, have proposed a $300 million commercial rent subsidy for small business with a simple application process, retooling provincial grants, and repayable loans for hospitality. This is the time for government spending in this area. The debt that we're racking up is important, but absolutely necessary. Cutting taxes is not going to help us repay that debt, but it's about building resilience in the community and allowing people to get through this pandemic and build back better when it's over and getting them through the winter. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. And Jordan, 1 minute, please.
Thanks, Melissa. Certainly small business is the driver. Right across British Columbia, 98% of businesses are small businesses. And the chamber is no different. I think there's 800 members for the chamber in a community of 12,000. That's an incredible number. It would be a tenth of that in any other place. So we believe in recreating a competitive business environment in British Columbia. Some of the strategies, reduce that PST waive the PST for a year. That's, it's been criticized, I get that, but you know it, for tourism and hospitality, $1.8 billion off the bottom line, just for those. And that is just straight out of your margins. We also are going to eliminate the small business tax. We've got some loan guarantees for businesses in hospitality and tourism to help with cash flow. We're going to keep in place wholesale pricing. We're working with the feds on a commercial tenant relief package, and because the feds have recognized the other one didn't work particularly well, and we're going to make communities whole on RMI, or ensure RMI stays in place, and MRDT is made whole. Communities are made whole.
Thank you, Jordan. It's amazing how much we can fill into 1 minute. So thank you for that. So question number 2, again, we're going to use the same format. This is directed to all candidates. You each have 1 minute to answer. And of course, we'll start with Keith, go over to Jeremy, and then over to Jordan. So the second question, in a recent Whistler Chamber labor survey, 68% of Whistler businesses with 50 or more employees did not have enough staff this past summer and did not think that they will have adequate staffing for this winter. If elected, what will your party do to help our community build back a stronger, more resilient workforce? And we'll go to Keith.
Thank you. So certainly the challenges in Whistler's workforce is not new, but certainly has been more challenging because of the pandemic. Through my years of community activism in Whistler, I've noticed a few common patterns, from a large percentage of workers being on working holidays, like you said which I saw in that survey. A lot of folks are coming from Australia, Britain, and New Zealand, and a lot of them don't know they don't know the labor laws. But certainly the main thing that I would do is to try to create a long-lasting fix to this challenge, is get involved and do an assessment of the provincial nominee program. I think there's great opportunities here for us to offer citizenship to maintain and sustain a workforce within the region, within Whistler.
Thank you, Keith. I appreciate your response. And now let's go over to Jeremy.
Thanks. Labor let's talk about labor in terms of housing and transportation. Housing is connected to absolutely everything, including social well-being and labor. The BC Greens are committed to housing. There's been movement on housing in the last 3 years after 16 years of BC Liberal neglect. Affordability is key to housing. There's no doubt that we need to continue to invest in housing. As your MLA, I would work with local governments and BC Housing to get the funding here to build the right kind of housing in the right places at the right time. We were asleep at the wheel. The government was asleep at the wheel on money laundering, and it's inflated house prices to a ridiculous degree. However, housing, when it comes to labor, affordable housing will help solve that problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. And Jordan, 1 minute.
Thanks, Melissa. We'll get to housing, and I'd like to dispel some of those fallacies that have just been disseminated. But listen, this is an acute issue that we have to deal with over the course of this winter season, no question about it, because we don't have open borders. We've got to work with the feds to try and get the opportunity to get holiday working visa staff back here. And other temporary foreign workers for now. But ultimately, I would agree with Jeremy that housing and transportation are key parts to ensure that we have access to the workforce wherever we can. But the workforce needs, for Whistler in particular, should be drawn from the region. And that means that a quality transportation system is key. I think it's also important to add that in Mount Currie, we have an opportunity to engage a really young and growing population into our workforce. And I know the Chamber's working on that, and the mountains are working on that, and it's an ongoing project that'll take time.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, everybody. It's my pleasure now to introduce you to Claire Ogilvie with the Pique Newsmagazine, who has the next set of questions for our candidates. Claire, if you wanted to
I hope everybody can hear me. My video has been disabled for some reason. So
we can hear you though, that's good.
Okay, so that's the important thing. I'm going to, I'm just getting some directions here, but I'm going to start by, there we are. I'm going to start by asking Keith a question, but I would like to hear from the other two candidates as well on the issue itself. So Keith, I'd just like to point to the fact that part of the NDP's 27 election platform was that it would aim to boost the budget for BC parks by up to 20 million over 2018-19, 2019-20. We've seen people flooding into the parks. We've seen a pass system introduced. We've seen how underfunded the parks are. So the NDP, having broken your 2017 funding promise on parks, how do you plan to support parks in the next 4 years if you are re-elected? And for Jeremy and Jordan, I'd like to hear from you about what your parties would do to try and support the parks as we see them become incredibly important to our survival through this COVID. So 1 minute to each of you, and starting with Keith, and then Jeremy, and then Jordan. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Claire. So certainly being someone who loves mountain biking and skiing and outdoor stuff in general, I certainly appreciate the parks we have and feel like they should be invested in. One of the opportunities that we have, and an unfortunate opportunity that we have because of COVID, is that there are funds available when it comes to infrastructure improvements available right now that can be utilized in building more trails and infrastructure within our parks. Certainly in my mind, I think some of that investment would make sense to be further up the corridor to try to encourage tourism. I think it'd be beneficial to Squamish and Whistler to have development further up the corridor, but certainly the monies are already available through the COVID recovery plan.
Over to Jeremy.
Thank you. Parks are the jewel of our region, and they're natural assets that contribute to physical and mental health, clean air, climate action, and many other things. It's can't even describe how much the Green Party is, of course, in favor of parks and better funding for parks. So I'll go straight from the party platform. Enhance funding for BC Parks and the Conservation Officer Service to a level that will improve infrastructure and ensure our natural ecosystems are not being degraded, create more campgrounds to meet demand, ensure that the creation of more sites it corresponds with overall parkland and doesn't cut into existing protected areas. Simple, no surprise that the Green Party is all in favor of parks. So am I. They're special places and they need to be properly funded and protected. Thank you. Stop.
Jordan, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, parks have been challenged. Certainly, over the time we were in government, we brought it from. I was in government. We brought it from 25 million to 40 million. Unfortunately, there was a cut for the last couple of years, $2 million. We also created the license plate fund, which was wildly successful for buying a license plate, and I hope you all buy one. And that's gone. That was supposed to go to the Parks Foundation to look to help to leverage money and to get additional land bases. But anyway, we have committed to restoring the cuts. We're going to increase the budget 15 million to 45 million, which still isn't enough, but it's a substantial and a committed increase. We'll double the focuses. We'll double some of the campsites in the high traffic areas like the Sea to Sky. And we'll enhance the youth ranger program to get more boots on the ground. And I am personally in favor of the proposal to provide additional access to the south side of Garibaldi after some consultation with First Nations and recognizing environmentally sensitive areas.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I have another question. I'll address it to all three of you. Last week, Pique undertook a very unscientific poll where we asked people about the issues that were important to them. And by over twice as many, people chose the environment and climate change as their top priority. The NDP came to power in 2017 promising to protect the environment. It failed to follow through on its plan to put the carbon tax up. It failed to introduce endangered species legislation, and greenhouse gases continue to rise. Why should people who care about addressing climate change vote for the NDP or indeed vote for any of you?
Great.
Just before you
Keith, go ahead, please. You have 1 minute.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going. Thank you for the question. Certainly the environment is a priority to the NDP, and being one of the youngest candidates in this whole election, it is especially important to me. The reality is finding a balance between managing the economy and prioritizing the environment is a challenging thing. However, I think the NDP are doing a fantastic job with it. We have the most ambitious climate plan on the continent in play right now, a plan that was created with Dr. Andrew Weaver and one that we are committed to putting into law if elected. Finding a balance is extremely difficult when it comes to ensuring that people have good jobs and we're caring about the economy. Our plan is to be net zero carbon emissions by 2050 and a reduction by 2030. I think it's 40%. I think I'm out of time. Yeah.
Thank you, Keith. Jeremy?
Thank you. If the environment and climate change are your top issues, and I've been hearing that from a lot of people on the doorsteps and in the coffee shops, then the Green Party is definitely the party for you, and I'm your candidate. I have environmental experience to bring to this. I think the Greens are a very accomplished party at this point. Our 3 MLAs have accomplished a great deal, including a note that Dr. Andrew Weaver, who helped with Clean BC, was a Green Party member. He did that while he was a member of the party. None of this would have happened without the Green Party's influence in this minority government. Clean BC is due to the Green Party's influence. Obviously, environment is a big focus. The Green Party is more than about just the environment. It's about social equity and financial responsibility as well. However, the environment and climate change are the Green Party's wheelhouse. So please vote Green if you care about the environment. Thanks.
Jordan?
Thanks. And I note that Andrew Weaver quit the Green Party and is endorsing the NDP. So I would love to know that backstory someday. But the climate crisis certainly is a defining moment for all of us. And believe you me, I understand it. I live on a farm that has been flooded 3 times. It's, you know, if you don't know what it's like to have 3 feet of water in your house, then you're certainly missing something that you should glad you're missing. These are increasingly flashy events, and this is a reflection of climate change. We all dealt with smoke and fires and the whole bit. Listen, we put in place the world-leading revenue-neutral carbon tax. This was a globally impressive thing. We got a Momentum for award from the Momentum for Change award from the UN. We believe we should move to get with Canada and are in favor, are supportive of the Pan-Canadian framework.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Over to you, Mo.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks to the candidates. We are going to open it up to your questions now. And what we're going to do now that we're going into the public's questions, even if you're asking for all 3 candidates to answer a question off the top, if there's any one candidate you'd like to lead it off, let us know. Otherwise, what I will start doing is if we have a running order that goes Keith, Jeremy, Jordan. But if Keith starts on one question, then the following question, we would then have Jeremy start and Jordan, etc. So we have a little bit of a rotation. So it's not always first, second, third in terms of how they speak. So that'll just sort of balance who gets to kick it off and who gets to bring it home on each issue. With that, we're going to go to Pete Crutchfield, Zoom Maestro. And Pete, you've got both questions that have come from the chat or some in the Q&A and some folks who may want to actually ask an audio question. So feel free to either read us one or invite someone on screen.
Okay, Mo, I'm going to go with the Q&A. We're going to start this off with the lovely and talented Cindy Filipenko, who asks, if elected, what will you and your party do to address the opiate and mental health crisis in our province?
Okay, let's lead off on this one. Let's go in reverse. So we're going to go to Jordan first. You're still muted, Jordan. I don't know if
yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so just for clarity, I have a minute or I have 2 minutes? 1 or 2? 1. Okay, you're muted. Yeah, no, we all know that this opioid crisis is a tragedy. I think it's hit all of us, and many of us, even in the sea to sky. You know, I think we all know people that are affected. I certainly saw it as a paramedic. Perry Lake, the previous health minister for the BC Liberals, declared a state of emergency, and we were all in the house in this together. We were slowly working it down, but the COVID spiked it back up again. You know, this is not even necessarily about addicts. It's about a poison drug supply. It's about housing. It's about expanding addiction treatment and recovery options. It's about extending, putting mental health workers in high schools and for kids, for youth. And it's about, we also propose to put 100 psychiatric nurses and social workers with police so that we can work together on the mental health calls. But it's really about a contaminated drug supply and fair enough, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jordan. And we're going to go to Keith.
Thank you. So certainly challenges with mental health and addictions is something that can affect anyone, and it takes a toll on loved ones. I know this from my own family experiences, and I know that my family's experiences is we're not alone in it. I'm proud of the leadership of the NDP have shown towards supporting people experiencing addictions and their families by creating a ministry to focus on mental health and addiction issues. I'm very excited in that that the NDP is offering funding to community groups, because they're the ones on the ground floor to be able to actually really make the biggest impact. We've invested in groups like the Sea to Sky Community Action Team, who are doing great work across the corridor. And we agree that, oh, I see the hand. I think I'm out. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, there's the element of game show that comes into this, unfortunately. And Jeremy, over to you.
I do feel like we're all speed talking like auctioneers. Okay, so these are overlapping crises, as Sonia first now mentioned in the leaders' debate. They're linked to housing and social equity, and they're a result of an erosion of the social fabric. I'm sorry to say it again, but an erosion of the social fabric under 16 years of Liberal government, of austerity and tax cuts that left no money for social assistance. Organizations like the Whistler Community Services Society work on outreach. They need to be supported. They need to be funded. They're doing the hard work of this in the community, dealing with the opioid crisis. The Green Party, not a big vote getter, but a very, very good public policy. $1 billion investment in mental health is in our platform. Sonia Firstenow is compassionate, she's understanding, and we know that this is the way to address mental health issues.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Pete, we're going to get another question from the public. What do you have?
Okay, just give me 1 second here. I just got to find it again. This is coming from an anonymous, mysterious person. And it is, if elected, what will you and your party do to protect old growth forests in BC?
Okay, and on that, we're going to start with Jeremy.
Thank you. Old growth forest. I'm really glad it came up in the leaders' debate. I'm really glad it's coming up now. It is a symbolic item in our natural resource land base. It has been, we're logged down to something like 3% of what the old growth that used to remain. This is an area where the government has made some strides, 353,000 hectares protected. The Green Party is very clear, a ban on old growth, on the logging of old growth forest. It needs to end. There's been enough. We have enough land base. We can log and harvest, have a sustainable forest industry. We don't need to go into any more old growth. Plain and simple, no more old growth logging.
Okay, thank you. And next we're going to go to Jordan.
Yeah, this is a complicated issue. If there's no more old growth logging, you just shut down the Lowot Nation and the Squamish Nation's forest sector. So I hope you're aware of some of the impacts there. But we believe in an ecosystem-based management approach, that we understand the importance of old growth and the place in the broader ecosystem and for biodiversity health. So there was a report submitted or generated by the this government, Merkel and Gorley panel, submitted it in the spring on old growth. It was submitted in the spring, but it was not yet issued and made publicly available. I don't know why that is. The data I have is approximately 70% of the remaining old growth in BC is already protected. There's 13,000 old growth management areas. The question is, how do they fit together? And I'd also remind the people that we created the Great Bear Rainforest and with the Ocean Protection Plan is the biggest ecosystem-based polygon in the world. So this is something that the BC Liberals have accomplished.
Thank you. And finally, we're going to hear from, we got everybody on that one? Yes. Oh, and Keith, I'm sorry. There we go. Looking at the wrong number. Go ahead, Keith.
Thanks, Mo. So like my colleague said, the NDP and the government, we're not experts on the needs, experts in the needs of the forest and what's going on with old growth. So we issued experts. We went out to experts and asked them to get information, do a study, and report back to us. They reported back to us that, we needed to protect some of these old growth trees, and we acted. There's now 353,000 hectares that are now protected because of this survey that we've received. The NDP is also, I think, for a lot of folks, I understand the environment is really important to a lot of you. From my understanding, there's also an appetite or an interest by the NDP to do the same type of review when it comes down to energy subsidies that are happening in fossil fuel industry within the province. We'll get experts to review what subsidies and what supports are going out to that industry and if they're actually needed or not. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. Okay, I want to share with folks, if you are looking at the Q&A, the questions don't necessarily show up for you in the order in which Pete has received them on the other end. So he is doing his best to keep them in the order in which they're coming through, and they just may not look like that to you as they arrive. So with that, I'm gonna go back to Pete for another question. Pete, let us know again if you're gonna read one, or we've got somebody who'd like to come online and share their voice.
Well, for a change of pace, we can bring this one on. She does have a question in the Q&A, but maybe it's the same question. So this is Vanessa Senecal coming on.
Right on, Vanessa, we'll get you to unmute, and the floor is yours.
Hello, and thank you. It is the same question that I had in the Q&A, but I will ask it in person. BC now gives $1 billion a year to oil and gas companies, twice as much as we spend fighting climate change and 5 times more than we get back in royalties. Will you commit to canceling oil and gas subsidies before the next election, even if that means standing up to your party? And this is definitely a deciding factor in who I'm voting for. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Vanessa. That's going to go out in this order. We're going to have it go to Jordan, then Keith, then Jeremy. So over to you, Jordan.
Thanks, Mo. Yes, this is a difficult issue. It's a challenge one. Oil and gas is a big industry in British Columbia, and you can't directly connect one piece with another piece. Now, we do this. We provide tax subsidies or tax credits to all sorts of industries. $500 million to the film industry. This and I believe that we should enter into, we should support industries to get them started. And then at the end of the day, we should be weaning these companies off of all subsidies, be it film and television, be it oil and gas. Frankly, the farming industry, the agriculture industry would like to have access to some of that, but we don't. So I think we have to have a level playing field at the end of the day for industries right across the country.
Great, and now we are going to go to Keith.
Well, I can echo a little bit of what I said in my last response, that the NDP is committed to do a review of what subsidies and what support the oil and gas industry are getting, and based on the findings we get from that report, we'll act accordingly, similar to what we did with old growth trees. And I also want to remind everyone that we do have an amazing climate action plan. We have the most progressive, most ambitious plan on the continent. We're #1, and the rest of the province and in the United States need to catch up to us because of the great work we're doing. We don't want to completely damage our economy as well. People need jobs, but certainly I think that the oil and gas industry is doing perfectly well. I think they got lots of money, and I don't think they need the support. And I'm looking forward to seeing what that report brings and us diverting those funds into green energies and technologies. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then I believe we go over to Jeremy.
Thank you. A climate action plan that is thanks in large part to the BC Greens. So I don't have to go against my party on this one. The BC Green Party is for ending all subsidies to oil and gas companies. I absolutely understand that this is a transition. You can't throw a shock at. There needs to be a smooth transition away from this, but it is clear there's no need to be propping up. Agreed, we do subsidize other industries. We shouldn't be subsidizing oil and gas. It is not the industry of the future. It does not make sense to subsidize it and to try and extend something that does not meet our climate targets and really doesn't serve the public interest.
Thank you. And finally to Jordan.
Oh, I spoke.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I'll speak again if you like.
No, we're going to, then I guess we're good on that one is where we're at. Everybody spoke? I'm sorry, occasionally there's stuff in the background. So we're gonna go back to Pete. And Pete, I understand people are voting on some of the Q&A questions. So we're gonna take the ones that have lots of votes with them and bring some of those more pressing questions forward. So back to you.
Okay, just doing a quick scan here. Looks like we've got another mysterious anonymous person who would like to ask Keith a question. It's, oh, hang on one sec. It just jumped on me. Yeah, this is a question for Keith. Given that you have spent the last few years trying to unsuccessfully unionize many of the businesses in Whistler, how can the population trust you to represent a balanced view and help the business community revitalize the community's economy?
Okay, and a reminder that Keith, you will have 2 minutes for that, and the other candidates will each have a minute to rebut or respond to that question as well. Over to you, Keith.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear I got 2 minutes on this one. All right, so when it comes down to the labor side and the organizing side, I don't think we have been unsuccessful on the organizing side. I think we've made a lot of great inroads and connections within the community and a variety of workplaces within Whistler. We currently have an application for the snowmaking departments of Vail Resorts sitting at the Labor Board, and we're waiting on results for that. In addition to that, the UFCW Whistler Workers Alliance has been doing advocacy within the Whistler community. We were successful at getting over $85,000 wrongfully withheld from Chateau Fairmont back into the pockets of the workforce. We have an additional charge filed at Vail Resorts over similar issues over overtime pay. So I and my work in advocacy within Whistler and my speaks for itself. I have been making positive changes for the people who work in that community who have been taken advantage of by some of the biggest and wealthiest corporations operating within Whistler. I'll leave there. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're going to go to Jeremy and then to Jordan. Over to you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Mo. How can the population trust me to represent a balanced view? I mean, that's as an engineer and as a town councillor, that's been my focus, is to present a balanced view. The reason I'm a Green Party candidate is because the Green Party is the ideal party to find balance. They've been showing that they can collaborate, take ideas from all sides, work across party lines on all sorts of issues. In terms of the community's economy, I understand business. I, again, as a councillor, had to work on finding balance between economy, the economics, and other needs of the community. There is there's no doubt that we need to listen to people and to find that balanced view, listen to experts, and to come up with a great revitalization plan that represents resilience and moves us forward into the future.
All right, thank you. And over to you, Jordan.
Sorry, Mo, could you restate the question, please?
Sure, we'll have Pete ask that question again. Pete, can you repeat that for Jordan?
Yeah, let me just, 1 second here.
This is where I forgot to ask for the blessings of the Zoom gods at the beginning. And it's a little tricky between switching to Pete and going to the Q&A, but
it's all good. Okay, so Jordan, this was the unionized question, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Given that you have spent the last few years trying to unsuccessfully unionize many of the businesses in Whistler, how can the population trust you to represent a balanced view and help the business community revitalize the community's economy? And that was directed to Keith, Phil.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that. I've been a member of many unions back with the forestry worker, then the PPCLI, and then I became a paramedic. That's a union job. You know, I believe that unions are an important component of our workforce right across the country and right across this province. They build some of the biggest projects in British Columbia. The Sea to Sky Highway was built with, for the most part, unionized workers. So I think it takes all kinds. It takes union employees. It takes a non-union sector. It takes all of us, and we're going to all need to be here because we are short on workers. We're estimated to need 1 million workers over the next 10 years, due to about 700,000 of them retiring, if nothing else, plus a growth in our economy. So there's we need everybody, and that needs a balance.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm going to take a question now. Oddly enough, I'm going to present the arts question from the arts sector. The entire arts and culture sector was hit exceptionally hard by COVID-19. Arts organizations, actors, musicians, painters, artisans, and others have seen their revenues dangerously reduced, making the survival of artists and arts groups very tenuous. And yet, at the same time, it was so interesting to observe the role of the arts and artists in helping people with well-being and mental health. And during COVID isolation, especially during the beginning, people turned so much to that, and we saw the importance it does have on our well-being and the mental health of entire communities. So if elected, what specific ideas or plans do you intend to put into place to help the arts and culture sector? And this one, we're going to go to Jeremy, Jordan, and Keith in that order. Over to you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Mo. Everybody knows that the arts are absolutely essential to community vitality, community creativity. I probably don't need to state that off the top, but it's key to many things in the community. So as your MLA, I would again defer to experts, listen carefully to what they have to say, and advocate for local arts organizations and artists, BC Arts Council, other funding agencies, work towards funding that is appropriate, that brings our arts community back from a very, very difficult time where they haven't been able to meet their audience face to face, which is difficult. So, creativity is such an important part of community, and it can't be lost. We need to invest in those people, and we can't invest if we keep cutting taxes and we don't have money to invest in those things.
Great, thank you. All right, and we're going to go to Jordan now.
Thanks, Mo. Yeah, my mom's an artist and has earned her living and has built a business on art. So it was early on that was really made clear to me, the role arts and culture plays, and how it builds community, how it really tells our stories. I know that we have a huge, rich and diverse offering of arts and culture in the whole Sea to Sky, from the O'Dane, which is a sort of one extreme, I guess, and the SLCC, to the Cove Commons on Bowen Island, K-Meek in West Vancouver, the Whistler Film Festival, and many, many, many more things. And we all know how live performance has been affected, like no après. I mean, what does that do to people's livelihood who make their living in that sector? So what we're committing to keeping gaming grants whole, because that gaming revenue is evaporated, but we're committed to keeping it whole and support the cultural workers and protect funding for the arts sectors that have had to suspend operations. It's critical, and we got to keep it underpinned.
Great, thank you. And Keith, finally. Over to you, Keith.
Sorry about that, Mo. I'm having my little, your Zoom devils have gone to my machine. It was rebooting or something. All right, thank you. So certainly, yeah, arts is very important to me and my family. The painting over there, my wife painted behind me, and certainly, the tourism arts and culture falls within the same ministry with tourism. So a part of our recovery plan, there is a commitment for $100 million to support the tourism industry. I and the NDP understand the importance of the arts and how it impacts people's lives in British Columbia. The NDP created the Arts Infrastructure Project or program to help communities build new art spaces so you can do what artists do best and perform and draw and paint. And we'll expand in the end, and we're planning to expand that program. And certainly the creative economy is very crucial to our building our new green economy, and it's certainly something the NDP will continue to support, especially when it comes to the film industry as well.
Great,
thank you.
Great, okay, thank you very much, all of you. Pete, let's go back to our audience for a question.
All right, the next one is from another anonymous attendee, and it's the next popular one. It says, if elected, what would you do to improve transit options, Vancouver to Pemberton?
Okay, and this one we kick off with Jordan.
My favorite subject. So we have, as you know, we've been advocating for a regional transit system for quite some time now. We didn't have all the communities on side originally because Whistler and Squamish particularly, were trying to build their internal systems, and that is entirely understandable. I think there's consensus now. No, I know there's consensus amongst all local governments, regional district, and really, fortunately, between Squamish Nation and Lil'wat Nation as well, to come together. We've put forward a proposal to the province. We had almost got it there, but unfortunately, we had a change in government in 2017. But since then, we just haven't managed to find that funding formula. And I know we have that formula. It just wasn't supported by the Green and NDP Alliance, and it's got to be equitable to Whistler because they're looking to have it on property taxes, and that means Whistler will pay the bulk, and that just doesn't work. It's not fair.
Okay, thank you very much. Next on this, we're going to go to Keith.
Thank you very much. Yeah, certainly when it comes down to improving regional public transportation, all three of us have been talking about it for weeks now. We're all on side. We all recognize the importance of it, and it needs to happen. The reasons it hasn't happened already was coming down to finding a funding structure within the municipalities that work and be sustainable for a long period of time. There is a challenge within the corridor of gas price gouging, and the municipalities wanted to introduce a fuel tax, which would make your gas prices even more than what they are today. So the NDP is committed to going after the gas companies who are gouging folks within the area and to create room for a gas tax. I've already spoken to John Horgan about this. He recognizes the importance, as do I, and if I'm elected and the NDP form government, it's something we'll be able to get done, no problem.
Thank you. And Jeremy.
Thanks, Mo. We all agree on this one, which is a nice change of pace, very polite Canadians all agreeing on this. We know it's about economic development and about people. We've heard there's consensus. We have not been able to bring it home yet under either government. And, you know, I don't believe that the BC Greens would have stood in the way of regional transit as part of a minority government, but I know that if I'm at the table, they won't be. This is essential to our region. It makes sense, affordability, work balance, quality of life, and climate action. It needs to happen. I appreciate that everybody wants to make it happen, but nobody's been able to make it happen. It's been talked about for a long time, far too long. It's doable. We need to get it done. We can't get too distracted by big proposals. We need to get buses on the road, frequent, reliable, comfortable now.
Great, thank you very much. Pete, let's see if we've got somebody who'd like to either bring their voice and their face online. We'll see if there's anybody wanting to put their hand up.
We actually don't. It seems people are a little bit shy right now. There's quite a few anonymous people and nobody's raising their hand. So if anybody wants to speak up, don't be shy. But for now, we'll just go back to the next anonymous question, which is, Whistler is sacred Indigenous land to the Squamish and Lil'wat nations. As of now, both communities have little representation in Whistler, Pemberton, and Squamish. They are still segregated communities. What will you do on a local level to help integrate the Indigenous communities into the Whistler, Squamish, and Pemberton communities? How do we create economic opportunities for these communities, and where in the hierarchy do you think they should be included? Seat at the table, leadership, etc.
Here's one that just screams covering it in 60 seconds, but that's what we're going to try to do. And we're going to lead off with Keith on this one.
Well, this is a hard one to try to get in 30 seconds, but certainly the NDP, I think, is certainly really committed to reconciliation, which is certainly the first most important step on trying to have an inclusive relationship and government. The NDP was the first political party to adopt the UN Declaration of Rights for Indigenous People, and we put it into law. We've also are the first ones to invest in on reserve housing. So there's a variety of things that we're doing to try to build and bridge a relationship with First Nation communities within the area. And the ones, and I've throughout the campaign, I've reached out to the Squamish and the Lillooet, and the feedback I'm getting is great, that they're happy that they now have a meaningful dialogue with government, and not just their voices are being heard, but they're seeing their ideas being acted upon. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we're going to go to Jeremy.
Thanks. As a volunteer ski patroller, I've made a lifelong friendship with a member of one of the local First Nations. They are the only one on ski patrol. It shouldn't be the only one. It should not be. This integration needs to happen far more widespread. How do we do this? Well, we ask the Indigenous people what the best way to integrate is. The Greens supported the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. We push for it. This needs to be a government-to-government discussion. The Economic Development Committee that's recently been formed as part of the framework with both Lillooet and Squamish needs to be effective. It needs to be productive, and it needs to be a good collaborative dialogue with First Nations to figure out how to do this in the best way possible.
Thank you. And Jordan.
Yeah, thanks. We have always had, or not always, but certainly for the last 20 years, have had a really good dialogue and relationship with our Indigenous partners. At the end of the day, the forestry tenures in the whole Sea to Sky are controlled by the forest or by First Nations. There's revenue sharing agreements on all sorts of things. The Master Development Agreement for Whistler Blackcomb, which we signed a number of years ago, has provision and partners of both First Nations. Look at the SLCC, there's another piece. But really, this is about economic development, economic opportunity. Certainly, there was thousands of acres of land transferred to the First Nations as a result of the Sea to Sky Highway upgrade in Whistler and Pemberton and Squamish, and this is providing opportunity. So it's about economic development, it's about integrating the communities. It's also well represented in our school system. I think you'll see Squamish Nation and Lillooet Nation there. So we're getting there, and we're doing the right thing.
Thank you very much. Okay, Pete, let's get another question from the audience, and then we're going to go to a sector question.
All right, looks like we've reached the portion of our show where people are using their names for the question. And this one's coming from a plucky young politician you might recognize. Mr. Jackson Crompton would like to know, wood fiber LNG, yes, no, why? The end.
Okay. Jackson Crompton, yeah, otherwise known as Le Mayor, as we like to think of him here in Whistler, or Your Worship, which it disturbs me a little bit, that term. But anyway, I love you, Jack. Thanks for asking. We're going to start this one with Jeremy and then go to Jordan and Keith. So over to you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Jack, for weighing in. Again, an easy one for me. I felt, sorry, this is 2 minutes, Mo? Or one?
No, this is 60 seconds for each of you.
60 seconds.
We'll start it from now.
Early on in this campaign, I had to give some answers where, really needed to examine the question. This one and many others are clear to me. The BC Greens are not in favor of LNG. It is not a good idea. No, 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 to answer the question directly. Not a good use of, again, fossil fuel subsidies, not an appropriate use of Howe Sound after it's just starting to recover with dolphins and porpoises and whales and marine life coming back. Not a good idea to reindustrialize Howe Sound. It's the jewel of our region. It represents a whole host of potential for green economy and tourism jobs, as well as just a beautiful natural asset. So wood fiber LNG is a project that is not for the future. It doesn't make sense. No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jordan.
Thanks, Mo. Yeah, this is a tough one. It has currently going through an EA process, or it's asking for an extension for the EA process for the Eagle Mountain Pipeline, as well as the project itself. It's going through significant changes in terms of economic conditions. Whether this project moves ahead or not, I couldn't say at this point. We'll see, but ultimately it's in the hands of the independent adjudicators through the EAO. It's got a license already, so it's a question of whether or not they get an extension to the EA, and if they don't, then it's done. If they do, then it can carry on. They ultimately have to make an investment decision. I think Canada is an ethical producer. This type of project, while I'd rather it was somewhere else, I guess, at the end of the day, this is about as clean an LNG facility as you're going to find anywhere in the world. And if we don't participate, we'll just abdicate it somewhere else. Somebody else who's a lot less ethical, will be filling the gap.
Okay, thank you. And that takes us to Keith.
So I agree with Jordan on the point that he pointed out, that this LNG project is going to be one of the cleanest ones out there, but it doesn't matter if it's the cleanest or the dirtiest. No LNG plant will happen in British Columbia unless it meets or exceeds our climate plan. Wood fiber has been, it's kind of been a tough one for the community because it's been off and on for such a long time. However, the reality of where we're at is that, like Jordan said as well, is that they're on economic environmental review. For them to pass that review, they have to meet the requirements in our climate plan, but also they are creating jobs. There's committed jobs to the Squamish Nation. They've been consulted and okay with it. This decision is not just to the government and nation, but all stakeholders. And as it stands now, there is interest, from what I'm hearing from folks, for this project to move forward. And there is a mechanism for the public to disagree as well.
Okay, thank you. And now Jeremy.
Jeremy went over.
I've already gone on wood fiber.
Oh, so we're all good. Sorry,
LNG, but
yes,
I could keep going.
No, I'm sure you could, but it was very clear. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Right, we are going to go, and thank you, Jack, for the question. We're going to go to a question from one of our community organizations. This was submitted by Whistler Community Services Society. It has been suggested that women's independence will be a silent victim of the pandemic. What initiatives would you introduce to assist in keeping women, and specifically single parents, employed in the labor market? And we are going to go for this one. It will go Jordan, Keith, Jeremy.
Thanks, Mo. Yes, that is absolutely true. The pandemic has affected employment for youth and for women far more dramatically than any other sector of the population. They've been that sector has been incredibly hard hit, and we need to work with the federal government to ensure that we have the backstops, I guess, or there's. Thanks, Mo. That there is financial support there, that the EI process supports women receiving funds. That we've also declared that we would support, or we really believe in the single parent employment initiative and the expansion there to help women get additional training to get into the workforce, as well as child care supports. We've got a child care plan, and I'm sure somebody will be asking about that.
Great, thank you. We're now going to go to Keith.
All right, got it. Perfect. Thank you very much. So yeah, certainly, I think it's quite alarming that so many women have been displaced because of the pandemic. And unfortunately, the reality is, the reason why is because a lot of women work in the service industry, from it being restaurants to retail. These are in other tourism-like businesses. And these are some of the industries that have been hurt the most by the pandemic. So certainly the NDP is offering a variety of things that can help support women and families generally. And the main thing would be something like our affordable childcare, $10 a day childcare. We're also in our new platform introducing free transit for children under 12 years old. So certainly a lot of this just rolls into the affordability stuff. And the NDP is rolling out lots of affordable housing initiatives.
Great. Thank you. And Jeremy.
Thank you. Childcare is one of the most important. The Green Party is all over childcare, free for under 3, 25 hours a week of early childhood education, rolling childhood education into the school system, providing professional development for early childhood education because there are not enough people who can help with that. I think the best part of this is payments of $500 a month for stay-at-home parents, to recognize that that is a very important role in society, and it needs to be recognized, even in a small amount. So the discussion of a 4-day work week is interesting on this one. I think could help contribute to that balance. I think it's a discussion that needs to be opened up. It may not be appropriate in all sectors of the Sea to Sky, but I think that those discussions around balance and parenting and are very important to this region and need to happen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We are going to go to the lovely and talented Claire Ogilvie. Pete, if you'd like to bring Claire's camera back on and her mic. Claire, you are going to share, you are a substitute Claire in this case, where Claire Ogilvie from the Pique is going to present a question from Claire from Aware, as she is handily called. So over to you, Claire 1, speaking for Claire 2.
I don't think I would put them in that order, considering the incredible work that Claire does for this community. But yes, Aware shared a great question with us. And it says, in our work at Aware, we are seeing increasing climate action on the ground. If elected, how will you use this point in time where we have our greatest chance to build back better to match the effort of citizens stepping up? What policy, infrastructure, or investment changes would you make? Would you seek to ensure BC and our region are leaders in this transition economy to ensure a more equitable, healthy, and climate resilient future? So we're really looking here for answers about the investment, the dollar figures, the infrastructure, and the policy. So it would be great if you could be specific in your answers about what you have, as opposed to just giving us a bit of green speak. If that's, maybe that's not a politically correct term anymore, I don't know. And Mo, did you have an order you wanted people to go in?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we're just on a rotating order. So this one will be Keith, then Jeremy, then Jordan. So over to you, Keith.
Okay, thank you. So certainly, yeah, climate change in regards to actual tangible things that we're going to be doing. Certainly investing in green technologies is one of the priorities that we have. Some of those funds to fund those projects are coming from dirty energy projects like LNG. But if we can utilize those funds to build us towards the green economy we should be in, then I think it's a good way to go. So certainly investing in improving our electric charging station infrastructure is certainly a priority for us. And we're already invested in $105 million to help industries become more cleaner operations. We've invested $106 million over the last 3 years to help schools get retrofitted. So certainly there's lots of opportunity for us to improve the environmental situation. Under the Clean BC plan, we're eliminating gas-powered cars. It's a great plan. If you haven't seen it, take a look at it. I'm gone.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. And on this one, we go to Jeremy.
Thanks, Mo. Just full disclosure, I'm on the board of Aware, and I didn't. It'll become obvious that I didn't get a preview of this question because it was pretty long-winded. But I'm going to speak to climate action the best that I can. So obviously, we know the climate crisis is the whole ball game. Really, it's been ignored. We need to take urgent action now. Clean BC was established due to green influence. The green platform is carbon neutral by 2045 to match California. It's more aggressive than Clean BC, as it needs to be. Ending fossil fuel subsidies, strategic investment to support business in the energy transition, and that's the key. It's a smooth transition. We don't want to throw people under the bus because they are working in older energy sectors. That this needs to be smooth. Accelerate zero emissions vehicles, and at a local level, for example, we would support the local municipality's 6 big moves and all the programs that flow into that and that require these changes in transportation, in buildings, and in waste. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And over to you, Jordan.
Thanks, Mo. I'm not sure that I followed the question exactly, but I'll cover one piece first, and that is, on the landscape side, we have a policy to, we'd like to implement and adopt it to no net loss of wetlands. We'd like to increase investments in invasive species. We certainly support the federal government in the elimination of certain single-use plastics and expanding that process as time goes on. We'd like to see that all hunting and fishing fees are reinvested back in wildlife spaces and populations. We believe in accelerating the reforestation in a dramatic way with a priority on high value wildlife areas. I think we've all heard as well that there's some discussion out there about if we planted 1.6 trillion trees or trillion trees, I think, around the world, that we could have a significant impact on carbon sequestration. So Canada can do its part, and British Columbia certainly can as well. We'd also make a minister responsible for fisheries and coastlines and look to create food share programs that reduce food waste.
Great, okay, thank you. All right, we're going to go back to Pete, and we have about almost another 30 minutes for audience questions, and we're able to focus on all of your questions going forward. The questions put forward by some of the community organizations, we are done on those, so we're going to go back to Pete for the next question.
All right, well, I guess Diane didn't want to hear my reading voice anymore because we've got someone here who wants to ask you a question in person. So I'm going to allow her to talk in just a couple of seconds. Okay, you can go ahead, Diane.
Okay, I have a question related to issues that have been in the media recently, and it's related to response to emergency health, mental health and addiction calls. Like the emergency calls, I'm talking 911. There's something happening with someone's mental health, or it could be related to both mental health or addiction. So my question is to all the party members. I'm wondering what if your party will consider shifting these types of calls for service away from the police and over to healthcare professionals? And if so, how do we fix this?
Okay, thank you, Diane. That's a very timely question. We're going to start this one with Jeremy. Go ahead.
You're muted, Jeremy.
Is this one in the Q&A or was it just verbal?
This was verbal.
Okay. I will simply say that this is a systemic issue that needs to be addressed on that level. Social equity has been eroding for decades. It's not really who British Columbians are, and it needs our attention. Issues like this that need to be addressed through community dialogue, through discussion, facilitated collaborative discussions, and I think that certainly the police question is somewhere that we need to have better focus. We need to understand the privilege and the experience of people who are marginalized and take that into account in policy development. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we go to Jordan.
Thanks, Mo. Yeah, this is a really difficult question. Certainly, the 911 system works well. It's something that I have worked with, and it's a great place to start there. But when those officers are dispatched and when paramedics are dispatched, often with officers, we only have a very limited amount of training for the mental health challenges that many people face. And we need better resources there. We've committed to hiring 100 psychiatric nurses and social workers that are hired specifically to work with police and paramedics on mental health calls. So we get the right people to the right place, hopefully at the right time. It's going to be hard to do across all of British Columbia, but I think that we can do it. We also want to fund a more integrated mobile response teams. It's a critical piece for families and individuals.
Okay, thanks, Jordan. And over to Keith.
Thank you. Yeah, and certainly I agree that and believe that mental health professionals teaming up with police is a good combo that has been working successfully. It is quite challenging, especially if it's just a phone call into 911 or straight into a police station, to try to be able to analyze and determine what type of a call it is. And usually I would think that you'd have to have people there to actually assess. So certainly I could see that certain mechanisms be put into place in common times or locations where mental health issues could arise, and maybe you want to ensure to have a health professional assisted there with a police officer. But certainly I think that in regards to when it comes down to funding structures moving forward, I do agree that we should be specializing in ensuring the police force have training with mental health, or they have somebody with them who has the skill sets to support them.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, we are going to go to another question, Pete.
All right, this is a written question. This is coming from Elizabeth Fendley, and she says, for Mr. Sturdy, you were present at the now infamous online roast for Ralph Sultan, at which Liberal MLA made demeaning comments about Bownin Ma, an NDP MLA. Like Andrew Wilkinson, you made no objections to the offensive remarks made by our colleague Jane Thornthwaite. How can voters trust that you and your party will confront bigotry and sexism whenever you see it?
Okay, there's a lightweight question for you, Jordan, but you will have 2 minutes to answer it. And then the other two gentlemen will each have 60 seconds in which to respond or comment as well. So over to you, Jordan, with 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mo. Not my proudest moment, as I think I said in the paper. The leader has apologized. Andrew Wilkinson's apologized, and Jane's apologized for these remarkably inappropriate remarks. They both reached out to Ms. Ma to personally apologize, and I'm not sure if she's would accept that, but the offer has been extended. Certainly no person should be subject to these types of comments. And I'm certainly sensitive to that. I'm surrounded by strong women, and starting with my mother, who built, as I mentioned earlier, very successful in business and was my employer and boss for several years. And so respect was rather a given. My wife and I are equal partners with our two girls in our farming business, and there's nothing I want more than a fair and equitable world for my kids and yours. We need to lead by example. And in the case of the roast, and it was a roast for Ralph Sultan, we all failed, both Ms. Ma and unfortunately Ralph as well, because this whole thing cast a pall on the retirement of a well-respected and hardworking and honorable man. And for that, all of the above, I'm sorry. Certainly BC needs to be a place of opportunity and fairness for everyone. Every person should be free of discrimination based on age, gender, sexual orientation, religion, place of origin. LGBTQ plus people must be treated with respect and able to live their lives free from discrimination. And that is our party policy. That is the mandate of the leader, and we are all on board with that. And I think I should also note that Mr. Laurie Thronis is no longer part of our party, who wasn't involved in that particular issue, but I know has been a subject of criticism.
Thank you, Jordan. this has been, it's tough on Zoom. I know there's probably some people who tuned in going, those all candidates meetings are usually so hilarious and animated. And it's we're obviously dealing with serious issues, but there's one thing I will say that Jordan said, absolutely truthfully as a politician, his two daughters are just going to take over all of us ultimately. They are really formidable girls, and it's nice that they're back in the community. I say that giving him zero credit as a parent, just so that we're clear, just today, because I'm very neutral. So there we go. So we are going to move on with that question, though, to rebut. We're going to go to Keith now.
Thank you very much. I don't have much to say to this one, other than really I've known Bo and Ma for a very long time, and the honest truth is she inspired me to run in this election. As a young-ish person, this was something that I didn't really feel comfortable doing. I thought running for politics is something I was supposed to do later on in my career, not when I'm at the prime of it. But Bowen inspired me to find the courage to stand up for myself and find my voice, and installed in me that my voice has meaning. So I thank Bowen for all the great work that she's done. And certainly I think the NDP have done a wonderful job getting a nice, diverse amount of candidates in this election, from 5 First Nation, 3 youth, and the list goes on and on. I think the NDP is doing a great job with bringing diversity to Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. I think I can speak for everyone on here and everybody from Whistler. We are all youngish, really. That's how we like to position ourselves. I'm feeling particularly youngish this evening, so that's great. And over to you, finally, Jeremy, on this issue.
Thanks. This really brings to mind for me Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's words that and especially because there are 3 men here standing before you as candidates, just because we have daughters and mothers and wives doesn't make us automatically good men. We're judged on our actions and what we do when we see injustice crop up. So I appreciate Jordan's apology and acknowledging that it wasn't the right thing. But this is part of his BC Liberal team. And from my perspective, it's showing a pattern of a potentially unhealthy culture when it comes to some sexist remark. Laurie thrown us on contraception. I think it would be fair to give Jordan a minute to respond. But given what we've seen in the past week from the BC Liberal teammates, I'd invite Jordan to comment on whether these views still fit into the big tent that he described when he talked about throwness, and does he think the culture of the BC Liberals needs to change?
I think, well, Jordan had 2 minutes on that. I think we're going to move on, and both his position and the actions of Andrew, of Andrew Wilkinson, he commented on. So I think we can move on to the next question. So Pete, what's standing by?
Okay, the next one we've got, the next popular one is from Claire Ruddy. And Mo, I do apologize. I had my head down trying to make sure everything in the back end is running smooth. So if this is the same question that was asked by Claire not from O'Hare, then just let me know. But Claire asks, pre-COVID communities around the world were declaring climate emergencies. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has warned we have less than a decade to avoid climatic catastrophe. And polls from varied sources showed public support for action on climate was the highest it had ever been. In our work, we are seeing increasing climate action on the ground from generations of all ages, businesses of all scales, people of all backgrounds. If elected, how will you use this point in time where we have our greatest chance to build back better to match the efforts of citizens stepping up? What policy, infrastructure, or investment changes would you seek to make to ensure?
I'm gonna interject, Pete, because it is the same question. It had a slightly different preamble, but it's the same question that, okay. So we are going to move on to the next one you've got to try and cover more ground for everybody. So fire away.
Cool. This one is from Barb Eslake, and she asks, for Keith, in the last election, NDP promised to bring in an endangered species law with the goal of protecting our beautiful province. Why did they drop this promise, and no mention of endangered species legislation in the 2020 platform? What would the other candidates do to protect endangered species? I'm thinking particularly in Howe Sound.
Okay, so thanks, Barb. I hope things are good in El Ridge. Nice to hear a familiar name. Keith, that means you're going to get, you have 2 minutes in order to respond to that question, and then you other gentlemen will get 1 minute each. So we do kick off here with Keith.
Thank you very much. So certainly I'm, on full disclosure, I'm not familiar with what you're referring to and what promise was made. I don't live my life doing politics and reading and tracking elections, every election that has ever happened. I personally believe that yes, we need to be focusing on taking care of endangered species and striking a balance with development, as well as making sure that our species and environment is protected. I don't even know if there's provisions within the Clean BCs Act that specifically talks about that. There could be, there may not be, but I would just say I do agree with you that endangered species should be protected.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to go to Jeremy.
Thank you. I'll just talk about the loss of biodiversity in general is a tragedy, and endangered species are the canary in the coal mine for us. They as Margaret Atwood says, you know, the planet will be fine, but do we still want a species? Do we want to be a species? And I think that the endangered species legislation protecting endangered species, particularly in Howe Sound, where we have some real symbolic species that need to be protected. I don't know why the promise was dropped. That's again, none of us were, well, two of us at least weren't at the table for that. It should be a priority. Biodiversity is the most important indicator of how we're doing on this planet, and we need to protect those species. Thank you. Okay, thanks, and that leaves it with you, Jordan.
Thanks, Mo. Yeah, I think we do need to develop a Made in BC Endangered Species Act. The federal act, which is potentially implemented in British Columbia, is a really, really blunt instrument. And we've seen that in Quebec, where there was an order that came down from the federal minister and it essentially almost shut down a town. So it's, you know, we need something that's more subtle, that has more levers to it. And we, you know, based on ecosystem-based management, on that principle of no net loss, and I agree with Jeremy. You know, biodiversity is really one of the measures that we should be looking at. When I talked about the cumulative effects assessment framework, we're monitoring in Howe Sound grizzly bears, Roosevelt elk, and marbled murrelet as value species to understand how that biodiversity is being managed and what is the cumulative effect on the landscape. So I'd be very interested maybe talking to Barb at another time about what she's talking about specifically around Howe Sound.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for that question, Barb. Okay, Pete, back to you.
Okay, this one is short and sweet from an anonymous attendee. What is your plan for childcare?
Okay, that we're going to start off with Jeremy. Over to you, Jeremy.
You're muted, Jeremy.
Thank you. Free childcare under 3, 25 hours of ECE, early childhood education for 3 and 4-year-olds, $500 a month payment for stay-at-home parents. Free childcare, a massive investment in childcare as an investment in our children's future. As a parent of 6-year-olds, I know that 0 to 6 are absolutely key time to be investing in our children. Childcare needs to be accessible. It needs to be free for those who can't afford it. And childcare is one of the most important things we can do for the health of our society. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. We're going to go to Jordan now.
Thanks, Mo. Yeah, this is a key issue for the Sea to Sky, something we've worked on for the last, well, the whole time I've been elected, as have all for, local governments as well. So there's a target of putting in place 30 spots per 100 kids. That's sort of the provincial target. And we're nowhere near that. I think Whistler's at 17 or 20 maybe, and Squamish is 17. Pemby is at 11. So clearly we have, this gives us an understanding where we need to go. We have a real childcare plan that doesn't give a bunch of money to people who don't need it. But we're saying we're going to invest $1.1 billion, $10 a day childcare for everybody for families that make up to $65,000, $20 a day for $85,000, and $30 a day up to $125,000. There's lots of other work that needs to happen in terms of in the future recognizing foreign credentials, making sure that childcare is a desirable career, not a transient one. So more ECE training and more respect and involving it or integrating it into the spectrum of education.
Great, thank you. Thanks, perfect. And now we go to Keith.
Thank you. So certainly childcare is bread and butter for the NDP. We're ones that leading the charge and recognize the importance of this early on. And I'm happy that the Greens and the Liberals are catching up and realizing the importance of this to families, but as well as to the economy. We initially tried to create universal $10 a day daycare. Last round, it was blocked by the Liberals and the Greens, so we switched pace. We have adopted $10 a day childcare has started up to 32,000 families at the moment. We're planning to expand that program and invest $1.5 billion over 3 years. However, having a bunch of facilities, which I recognize is crucial in the Sea to Sky region, having facilities is crucial, but having educators is equally important. So we've expanded our program spaces and bursary funding to help encourage childcare professionals to get the education they need to fill the facilities that we build. So I'll stop there. I have more to say, but.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, it's very exciting. The prospect of $10 a day daycare almost makes me want to have more kids. Not really. Who am I kidding? Yeah, Jordan, grown children, we're the ones all laughing on the other side of it now. We've crested. Okay, Pete, back to you for another question.
All right, well, I'm going to bring in the lovely and talented Cynthia Higgins to ask a question in person to the candidates.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I had a little preamble, but I think I'll skip it in light of time and just ask the question in this fashion. In noting that the government is tracking COVID-19 related costs through multiple data points, how does your party commit to ensuring that school districts will have the funds necessary to fully cover all federal and provincial health and safety requirements as long as COVID-19 remains a public health concern?
Okay, it's a great education question. That's going to go first to Jordan.
Thanks, Mo. Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I think it's a real concern for school districts. There's a number of issues packaged up in here, not the least of which is the school districts are increasingly challenged here in the Sea to Sky, but also in West Vancouver, where foreign students aren't here, and that makes up somewhere between 7 and 15% of the budget. So that's a gap. School districts are using any reserves right now to cover that gap. The provinces, or we put together collectively, and the $8 billion that we put together, not all of which is spent yet, but the collective package was to support COVID shortages, including school districts, but also local governments. And one of the other things that we support, as I mentioned, making governments whole on some of their costs, certainly MRDT and that type of thing.
Great, perfect, thank you very much. Keith, we're over to you.
Perfect, thank you so much. So certainly schools and parents, everybody needs some support right now. This is a huge issue, and certainly ensuring that schools have proper funding to meet all the health requirements is essential. I personally, I'm meeting up or Zoom calling a group of parents later on tonight from West Vancouver, so they can explain to me in more detail what the challenges that they're facing in their school. And the commitment that I've made to them is, if I'm elected, I will jump right into this and talk to the school systems and the boards to get a sense on exactly what's happening and what they need. Certainly there is during this crisis, there is monies around to support schools and parents and children, and we'll try to get the appropriate funding to them.
Okay, thank you. And we'll finish this one up with Jeremy.
Thank you. First of all, I want to recognize the incredible job that teachers are doing throughout this COVID crisis, and that they need to be supported and they need to feel safe. And so this is an opportunity for public investment. It's I can't think of a better use of public funds than so maintain funding for personal protective equipment and online learning. Make sure every school district has the resources. Support mental health of our students. This is from the Green Party platform, 24 million in new funding for mental health and counselors. Province-wide plan to address racism, nothing to do with COVID. Well, not directly, it's from the platform. But really what this is about is we're talking about investment. We need funds. We don't make these kinds of investments in schools and school districts if we cut taxes. And it's certainly cutting the PST is not a good way to get us these investments in teachers and in students and keeping everybody safe.
Okay, and we are getting down to the wire. We're able to take one more question before we hear the closing comments from the candidates. So Pete, let's make it a doozy.
Ooh, you gotta read through and find something?
Take a quick boo and see what you think is there. That we have it, definitely a topic that we have not touched on yet would be ideal.
Well, this one definitely seems like we haven't touched on it. So this is from Gizem Kaya. Apologies if I mispronounced your name. The food insecurity levels in the corridor have been exacerbated by the pandemic. Many entry-level workers, immigrants who were just getting by before the pandemic all of a sudden become food insecure. First Nations communities were advised to not leave their community. Kids who had access food through school all of a sudden lost that access. We know food insecurity is a direct result of poverty. What are your poverty reduction plans?
Okay, thank you for that question. And that's one is going to kick off with Jeremy first.
Thanks for this question about food security. I got the chance to visit Under One Roof, the market, Helping Hands in Squamish, which is a great model of destigmatizing the food bank, turning it into a market where anybody can go in and contribute. Also, I'm aware of the work that Whistler Community Services Society is doing in this area. Poverty reduction plans, I can't give you specifics on this one. What I can tell you is that the Green Party recognizes food insecurity is something that should not be a part of our society. We need to work in collaboration with these community organizations that provide food for people who need it. It needs to be done smart and effectively, and there is no room in a society like ours for not doing our absolute best with this. And that means I don't have specific dollar figures, but I can tell you that the Green Party would push to end this kind of injustice. Thanks.
Great. And next we go to Jordan.
Thanks, Mo. Yeah, food security is obviously something close to my heart as a food producer. And, there's a number of strategies that we can put in place there to help get additional food out to people and also help the environment. One of them is a food diversion program, because we waste a tremendous amount of food. I think 40% of our food stream ends up in the landfill, and that needs to change. And much of it doesn't have to be there. So there's ways of getting it to people. There's lots of great work going on in schools around food, and actually in Sea to Sky schools, they did not lose access to the food programs. Those carried on, which is great, and that's a kudos to the school district. There's also additional supports, and we may want to make sure that nonprofits are whole, because as Jeremy mentioned, there's the Under One Roof, Sea to Sky Community Services, Whistler Community Services are super challenged right now. But ultimately, we need to rebuild this economy so people have a chance to have a job.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. And now we go to Keith.
Thank you. So certainly, yeah, I think when it comes down to the root of the concerns of where the challenge comes from food security comes from people not having the funds to be able to purchase it themselves. Access to food is not the problem. Funds to purchase it is. So certainly then this leads me to when it comes down to, we think of affordability and the cost of living concerns that people have. Certainly I'm excited that the NDP is really focused on improving affordable housing, but as well as through our Crown corporations have been reducing the costs for people. And so we've eliminated MSP, it's not a Crown Corp. We've reduced hydro costs, and folks who use ICBC and have a vehicle can expect a 20% deduction of their ICB fees or insurance fees. So there's a variety of ways where we can try to save people money. Certainly this is now not the time for PST to go away and for ICBC to be privatized or allow private business into BC. These things are going to damage people, not help them.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you everybody for your questions. We really appreciate that, and covering a lot of issues here tonight. So that brings us to almost wrapping up. Now each of the three candidates get 3 minutes each to close out with a statement, and we'll go back to the order that we had at the beginning. So that means we're going to begin with Keith Murdoch.
All right, here we go. So John Horgan's NDP has shown British Columbians over the last 3.5 years that we can balance our budgets while making life better for all of us. Our new plan has 3 priorities: better healthcare for you and your family, affordability and security in your home and community, good jobs and livelihoods, and a clean energy future. Our new Recovery Investment Fund will create the jobs communities need and will go towards building more schools, hospitals, affordable housing, childcare facilities, and other critical infrastructure. We will help families with children by creating more childcare spaces, expanding the $10 a day childcare program, and making transit free for children under 12 years old. We will continue our housing plan that has 25,000 affordable units built or on their way. And we'll invest in and expand public transportation, including better regional public transit between Metro Vancouver and the Sea to Sky region. We will support good jobs and the environment by putting workers and small businesses at the front of our economic recovery, especially those who've been affected the most, such as the tourism industry. Moving our country-leading climate plan forward by investing in new technologies that will create new jobs while also achieving our goal of net zero emissions by 2050. We are all facing big challenges over the next few years, and the Liberals' plan to remove PST and to introduce private car insurance will hurt British Columbians, not help them. Now is the time to invest in services that people rely on, not defund them, which will result in job losses and a reduction in service and capacity in our hospitals and so on. Our province's future is in all of your hands, the voters. So the question that British Columbians need to ask themselves is, which direction do they want to go and who do they want to lead them? The BC Liberals have shown that they cannot be trusted, stealing from ICBC, selling off BC Rail, giving tax breaks to the wealthy, while cutting essential services like education and healthcare. The Greens have good ideas, but no real plan to implement them. The NDP is the only party that has the plan which will support people and businesses and rebuild our economy while focusing on the needs of the environment and the importance of reconciliation. I think that having an NDP MLA in this riding alongside an NDP government will help bring a stronger voice to Whistler and all the communities within the riding. And together, we can make the positive changes we all want. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Keith. This takes us next to, we go to Jeremy Valeriot of the Green Party for his final comments.
Thanks, Mo, and thanks for moderating such a great session. It's been really good. So I told you, I promised to make a case for the Green Party MLA, and I'm going to do it now. Number one, the environment and climate. This riding is ready to go green. There's momentum that's been building for 2 decades. Greens finished second last time. They are the natural party, the natural way to ensure a minority government that works for people. So as the Greens, we can be a moderating influence for this adversarial two-party system that really hasn't served British Columbians well in the past few decades. We've shown, the Greens have shown that we are a serious party. We've shown collaboration and achievement over the last 3 years with our MLAs. As a Green MLA, I can offer better local representation. I'm not beholden to towing the party line, voting with the party as a bloc. I can vote on matters, I could vote on matters of conscience, and I can vote on sea to sky issues without getting into the politics of the party politics, which is what Greens are nimble and flexible in that way, and it's very important for democracy. Greens have shown that we're in touch with British Columbians, we're trustworthy, we're compassionate, we're courageous, and we're dedicated to public service. Sonia Furstenau, Tuesday night, showed that she is a gifted leader. The party's surging after that leaders' debate. She showed a true contrast and a true understanding of some of the issues of our time. As for myself, I can offer experience, new ideas, and a new energy, and I believe that that is what is needed here. You know, a minority government with Greens at the table, it's good for democracy, it's good for people. It's important for the way that we talk to each other and the way that we learn to collaborate and cooperate. Now is the time for that, a change in the way we talk to each other. Overlapping crises, modeling the way as leaders is not back and forth, you know, not back and forth ideological battles where we swing wildly in one direction and the other. This is time for moderation. So all that said, all the arrows are pointing in the direction for this riding. This is one of a handful in the party that are likely to go green. It's important. Simply put, if you were thinking about voting green, now is the time to vote green. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. And we will finish this up with Jordan Sturdy. You got to unmute there, Jordan.
I am muted.
There
yes, I understand. Thanks. You know, right now we're working through a crisis, and you know the Western world governments around the world are going to be taking on debt. Now's the time to do that, to lower the cost of doing business, for making very significant major infrastructure investments, to build schools, to build hospitals, to expand a foundry, you know, to take on, to build transportation infrastructure. Now is the time. We intend to table a plan in 2022 to the budget 2022 to bring us back into balance. And we're also committed to not cutting services for you know, as a result of having to take on this debt. It's low cost debt these days, and we just need to support business and communities and families. So people realize that I'm a realist, I'm a doer, I'm focused on results rather than ideologies. My starting place is always sound economic principles, guided by social well-being and sustained by a healthy environment. We face unprecedented challenges in uncertain times in right across the province, but is especially acute here in Whistler and Pemberton, where hospitality and tourism are such a dominant part of our economy and are woven into everything that we do. I have experience, knowledge, relationships to well represent this Sea to Sky. It's been my privilege to serve the constituents for the last 7 years, and we worked hard on a huge range of issues and probably the most diverse riding in British Columbia. But remember, it's also more than the work that just your MLA does. I'm lucky to have built an incredible constituency team right across the ground here in Sea to Sky. Sharon Thompson and Andrea Flitoff work out of the West Van office, covering West Van, Bowen Island, Lions Bay, and overlapping to Squamish, where Nicola Bentley, who lives in Whistler, covers Squamish in the northern part of the riding, including Pemberton, Darcy, and the Statling Nation down Lillooet Lake. We have a solid and experienced team, always available, very much ready to get back to work for you. regardless of the provincial outcome of the provincial election. I have strong relationships and working experience with deputy ministers and assistant deputy ministers across ministries in government. I'm also known as an effective collaborator across party lines. Many a time I've sat in the legislature with my colleagues across the aisle, explaining the impacts and proposing solutions to local and provincial issues, and they've always been well received. But the reality of working in the legislature is not what you see in QP. Most people want to do just what's best for the province. And just incidentally, we're not whipped. We do operate under a no surprise rule. And you'll see that the Greens voted as a block the whole time. Nobody stepped out of line there. But I've spent most of my life working here. It's been my privilege to be your MLA, and I ask for your vote on October.
Wow, that was like a perfect 3 minutes. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Nicely done. That brings us to a close for this session. And first off, I want to thank the three candidates for your time. I know you're out on the campaigning tour. You're doing all candidates meetings. You're taking meetings after this one, as Keith mentioned. I'm sure you're all over the phones as well. And it's a lot easier even for me to stand here and for all those anonymous folks to be on the other side of the screen. So thank you for standing for this position, for caring this much about both our region and the province. It takes a lot to be the folks that are out there on the front line running. So our thanks to all of you, and for doing a great job tonight. Very, very civil, which is awesome. This ain't no American debate, apparently, and we are very glad for that. We want to also thank all of you who took part in this. My thanks to the chamber who coordinates this, Chanel Conley, to all the heavy lifting. I want to thank Pete Crutchfield. They're the Zoom maestro in the back, taking care of everybody, and the Pique and the chamber for making this happen, and to Dean Fesser here at Arts Whistler for making this little space look good. Thanks, Dean, for making that happen. We encourage everybody to get out and vote. Talk to your friends, talk to your kids. Jordan and I are both fortunate enough to have kids who can vote. Let's make sure our young people vote. Advanced voting begins October 15th and goes to the 21st in various locations. Of course, Election Day is Saturday, October 24th. I encourage you to get out there. Go to early polls if you need to, as they do in Florida. Feel free to vote early and vote often. And stay away from, if you see any Republican ballot boxes, maybe don't use those. But it's just so critical to our democracy. So we're fortunate to be in this place in the world when we see what happens in other countries. So let's not just take that for granted. It's very important. So speaking to the converted with folks who participate in all candidates meeting, but with that, please go spread the gospel to get folks out there voting. Thanks again to the three candidates. Best of luck on the rest of your journey to October 24th. And thank you for spending your time with us tonight. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Mo. Thanks to everyone for watching.
Everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.